I never expected my past to walk back into my life wearing confidence like armor. For 20 years, it stayed buried, quiet, distant, almost unreal. I had built something new from nothing, a life, a career, a sense of control no one could take from me again, or so I thought, until the courtroom doors opened. They stood there like they belonged, my parents. Calm, composed, whispering to each other as if they hadn't erased me from their lives decades ago, as if they hadn't shut the door on a terrified 16-year-old girl with nowhere to go. And yet, there they were smiling, not warm smiles, not relieved smiles, satisfied ones. They thought they had already won. They thought I was still that same powerless girl. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that I wasn't standing in that courtroom as their daughter. I was the judge. And in just a few moments, everything they believed was about to collapse. But to understand how we got there, you have to go back to the night my life split in two. It was late autumn, the kind of night where the air feels sharp enough to cut. The sky was heavy and gray, like it was holding back something it couldn't quite release. Inside the house, everything was too quiet. My mother sat at the kitchen table, her posture stiff, her eyes cold. My father paced behind her, restless, like even standing still near me was unbearable. No yelling, no chaos, just silence. And somehow that made it worse. "You've humiliated us," my mother said finally, her voice flat and precise. My father didn't look at me. "You've destroyed your future." I stood there, hands trembling, trying to find something, anything to say, but the words wouldn't come. Then my mother delivered the sentence that would change everything. "You're leaving, tonight." No hesitation, no discussion, just a decision. They never even said the word pregnant, as if ignoring it could erase the reality growing inside me. I remember staring at my hands, thinking how strange it was that just hours earlier, they had been holding a pen in class, and now they held nothing at all. No home, no plan, no safety. Just a plastic bag with a few clothes and a future I didn't understand. I didn't cry, not then. Some pain is too big for tears. There was only one place left to go, my grandmother's house. A small, aging home at the edge of town, where the porch creaked and the lights always stayed on a little longer than necessary. She had lived alone for years, filling her days with baking, gardening, and quiet acts of kindness no one ever asked for. When I knocked, I almost turned around, but the door opened before I could. She looked at me, really looked, and in that single moment she understood everything. No questions, no judgment, just a soft step back and a gentle whisper. "Come in, sweetheart." That was it, and somehow that was everything. I broke down in her arms, the weight of the night finally crashing over me. She held me like she had been waiting for this moment all along, like she knew one day I would need saving. That night in a small guest room with worn quilts and a dim lamp, my old life ended. And a new one, harder, heavier, but stronger, began. But what I didn't know then was that the same people who cast me out would one day stand in front of me again, not as parents, but as opponents. And next time, I wouldn't be the one being judged. That first night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar quiet. It wasn't the tense silence of my parents' house, the kind that made you feel like you were always doing something wrong. This was different. This silence felt safe. Still, my mind wouldn't stop racing. What happens next? How do I survive this? How do I raise a child when I'm still one myself? Every question felt heavier than the last. And yet, sometime just before morning, exhaustion pulled me under. I woke to the smell of something warm. Cinnamon, butter, comfort. For a brief moment, I forgot everything. Then reality came rushing back. I sat up too fast, panic tightening in my chest, until I heard her voice from the kitchen. "Take your time, baby. Breakfast isn't going anywhere." It was such a simple sentence, but it carried something I hadn't felt in days. Patience. Care, love without conditions. Grandma didn't interrogate me. She didn't demand explanations or lecture me about responsibility. Instead, she gave me space to breathe. Over breakfast, she talked about ordinary things: the weather, her garden, a neighbor's stubborn goat that kept escaping its fence. It was almost surreal, like she was gently reminding me that the world hadn't ended, even if mine had changed forever. Finally, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "We'll figure this out," she said. "Not you will. We will." That single word shifted something inside me. For the first time since the test turned positive, I didn't feel alone. Life didn't suddenly become easy. If anything, it became more real. School was harder now, not because of the work, but because of the whispers. People stared. They talked. Some pretended not to notice, which somehow felt worse. I became a story. The girl who got kicked out. The pregnant one. Labels spread faster than truth ever could. But every afternoon, no matter how heavy the day felt, I knew where I was going back to. Home. Not the house I grew up in. Something better. Grandma built a rhythm around us. Doctor appointments, meals, quiet evenings on the porch. She made sure I ate, even when I insisted I wasn't hungry. She made sure I rested, even when anxiety kept trying to take over. And more importantly, she made sure I didn't lose myself. "You're still you," she reminded me often. "This doesn't take that away." At first, I didn't believe her, but she never stopped saying it. As the months passed, fear slowly made room for something new. Not confidence, not yet, but determination. Late at night, I would sit by the window, one hand resting on my growing stomach, thinking about the tiny life depending on me. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew one thing: I had to. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun disappear behind the trees, Grandma asked me a question that caught me off guard. "What kind of life do you want for your child?" I hesitated, because the truth was I had never thought that far ahead. Finally, I whispered, "Better than mine." She squeezed my hand gently. "And you're going to give it." I didn't realize it then, but that quiet promise, spoken on a creaky porch swing, would become the foundation of everything I built after. Because very soon, life was about to test just how far I was willing to go to keep it. And when that moment came, there would be no turning back. The night it happened, everything felt strangely calm. Too calm, like the world was holding its breath. I had spent the entire day restless, unable to sit still, unable to focus. Every small discomfort made my heart race. Every silence felt louder than it should. Grandma noticed, of course. She always did. "You pacing holes into my floor won't make him come faster," she said with a soft smile, watching me shuffle back and forth across the living room. "I know," I muttered, gripping the back of a chair. "I just feel like something's about to happen." She nodded, not dismissing it. "Then we'll be ready when it does." It started just after midnight, a sharp pain that stole the air from my lungs. Then another, stronger, closer, real. For a moment, fear took over completely. I froze, hands gripping my stomach, panic rising like a wave I couldn't stop. "I can't do this," I whispered. But Grandma was already moving, grabbing her keys, her purse, her coat. "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "And you will." The hospital lights were too bright. Everything smelled sterile, cold, unfamiliar. Voices echoed. Machines beeped. Nurses moved quickly, calmly, like this was just another night. But for me, this was everything. Hours blurred together. Pain came in waves, intense, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. I had never felt anything like it. Time stopped making sense. At one point, I grabbed Grandma's hand so tightly I thought I might hurt her. "I'm scared," I said, my voice breaking. She leaned closer, her voice steady and warm. "Fear doesn't mean you're weak," she said. "It means you're about to do something strong." And somehow I held on. Through every contraction, every moment I thought I couldn't keep going, I did, because I had no other choice, because someone else was depending on me now. And then a cry. Sharp, new, alive, everything stopped. The room shifted. The pain faded into something distant, almost unreal. They placed him in my arms, small and fragile, wrapped in a blanket that seemed too big for him. My son. I stared at him, barely breathing, afraid that if I blinked he might disappear. But he didn't. He was real, warm, mine. Something inside me changed in that moment. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but deeply. I wasn't just a scared 16-year-old anymore. I wasn't just the girl my parents rejected. I was needed, and that changed everything. Grandma stood beside me, tears quietly slipping down her cheeks. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head slightly, overwhelmed. "No, we did." Because the truth was, I wouldn't have made it here without her. Not even close. That night, as the hospital room grew quiet and the world outside kept moving like nothing had changed, I made a promise. Not out loud, not for anyone else to hear, but for him, for me, for the life I refused to let fall apart. I promised that no matter how hard it got, no matter how many times I felt like giving up, I would build something better. But promises are easy in quiet moments. The real test comes later, in sleepless nights, in empty bank accounts, in the kind of exhaustion that makes you question everything. And very soon, reality was about to hit harder than anything I had faced before. Because bringing him into the world was only the beginning, raising him. That was the real battle. If anyone tells you motherhood starts with soft lullabies and peaceful nights, they're lying. At least, that's not how it began for me. It started with exhaustion so deep it felt like it lived in my bones. The first few weeks blurred together. Day and night stopped meaning anything. My son cried at all hours, hungry, uncomfortable, needing something I was still learning how to give. I was constantly afraid I was doing something wrong. Too warm. Too cold. Too much. Not enough. Every small mistake felt enormous. Every quiet moment felt suspicious, like something was about to go wrong. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I would sit in the dim kitchen at 2 a.m., gently rocking him with one arm while trying to keep my eyes open. Some nights, I didn't even realize I was crying until tears hit his tiny blanket. Not loud crying, just silent, steady exhaustion. But every morning, without fail, Grandma was there, moving quietly through the house like she didn't want to disturb what little peace existed. She never made me feel like I was failing. Not once. Instead, she'd take him gently from my arms and say, "Go rest, I've got him." And somehow I believed her. Still, life didn't pause just because I was overwhelmed. I had school, responsibilities, a future I had promised myself I wouldn't give up on. So I learned to do both. Badly at first, then better. I remember one night sitting at the kitchen table, textbooks open, trying to focus while my son fussed beside me. My head pounded, my body begged for rest. "I can't do this," I whispered. Grandma, standing at the sink, didn't even turn around. "Yes, you can," she replied calmly. "Not you'll try, not we'll see, just certainty," so I kept going. One assignment at a time, one night at a time, one small step forward. Money was tight, tighter than I had ever experienced. Every dollar had a purpose before it even arrived. We counted everything: groceries, gas, baby supplies. Nothing was wasted. Grandma clipped coupons like it was her full-time job. She stretched meals in ways I didn't think were possible. She never complained, not once, even when I knew she was giving more than she had. Looking back, I realized something I didn't fully understand then. She wasn't just helping me survive. She was teaching me how to endure. Outside the house, things weren't easier. School still came with stares. Judgment didn't disappear, it just became quieter, more subtle. But I stopped shrinking from it. Because every time I looked at my son, I remembered why I couldn't afford to. Slowly, something began to change. Not around me. Inside me, the fear didn't disappear, the struggle didn't fade, but I started to feel stronger. Like maybe I wasn't just surviving anymore. Maybe I was building something. One evening, after a long, exhausting day, I sat on the porch with my son asleep in my arms. The world felt quiet for once. Still, peaceful. Grandma sat beside me, watching the road like she always did. "You're different," she said suddenly. I frowned. "Different how?" She smiled softly. "You don't break as easy anymore." At the time, I didn't realize how important those words were. Because very soon, life was about to test that strength in ways I never saw coming. Because surviving the beginning was one thing, but what came next, for a long time my world was small. Not in a bad way, just contained. Everything revolved around survival. Feedings, diapers, school assignments, stretching every dollar until it almost broke. Getting through one day so I could face the next. Dreams didn't disappear. They just got quieter. I worked wherever I could. After finishing school, I took a job at a small grocery store on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Bagging items, stocking shelves, cleaning up spills no one else wanted to deal with. Some nights, I'd leave with sore feet and aching shoulders, wondering how long I could keep this pace. But every time that thought crept in, I pushed it away. because standing still scared me more than being tired ever could. Money was still tight, the kind of tight that forces you to calculate everything. Gas or groceries, new shoes or diapers, pay now or delay and hope nothing goes wrong. And sometimes, things did go wrong, which is when you learn just how fragile stability really is. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Grandma had called someone to look at the roof. Nothing serious, just a minor leak we had been managing for weeks. Or so we thought. The man who showed up didn't feel right from the beginning. Too confident, too pushy, too quick to turn a small issue into a disaster. "This is bad," he said, shaking his head dramatically. "Really bad. If you don't fix this immediately, the whole structure could collapse." I watched Grandma carefully. She didn't panic, didn't rush, just listened. But when he named the price, thousands of dollars up front, something in me tightened. It didn't make sense. None of it did. "I need a decision today," he pressed, "or I can't guarantee anything." That was it. That was the moment something inside me clicked. "Actually," I said, stepping forward, my voice calm but firm, "we won't be making any decisions today." He turned to me, surprised. "This is urgent," he insisted. "Then we'll get a second opinion," I replied. "And if you don't leave, I'll call someone who can make you." The shift was immediate. His confidence cracked. His tone changed. And within seconds, he was gone, just like that. The silence that followed felt different. Not tense, not uncertain. Powerful. Grandma looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Not concern, not worry, respect. "Well," she said slowly, "look at you." I shrugged, trying to play it off. He was clearly lying. "That's not what I mean," she said, studying me. "You didn't hesitate." And she was right. I hadn't. For the first time, I didn't second-guess myself. I didn't shrink. I didn't wait for someone else to step in. I handled it. Later that evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Have you ever thought about law?" I blinked. "Law, me," she nodded. "You see things, you stand up when it matters. That's not something everyone can do." At first, I laughed it off. It felt too big, too far away, too unrealistic for someone like me. But that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the idea didn't leave. It stayed. Quiet. Persistent. Growing. Because for the first time, I wasn't just thinking about surviving anymore. I was thinking about becoming something more. And that single thought was about to change the entire direction of my life. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because my son was crying, not because I was overwhelmed, but because a single question kept circling in my mind. What if I actually tried? The idea felt almost dangerous. Not impossible, but close enough to make my chest tighten. Law school, a career, a future beyond survival. People like me didn't usually get those chances. We worked. We managed. We got by. That was the pattern, but something had shifted. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I said it out loud. "I'm thinking about going back to school." Grandma didn't even look surprised. She just nodded like she had been waiting for me to catch up to the idea. "Took you long enough," she said, sipping her coffee. That was all the encouragement I needed. I started small. Community college, affordable, close, manageable. Still, it felt like stepping into a completely different world. I wasn't the youngest student anymore. I wasn't the most prepared. But I was the most determined, because failure wasn't just failure for me. It meant risking everything I had already fought to build. My days became carefully structured chaos. Classes in the morning, work in the afternoon, motherhood all the time. There were no breaks, no shortcuts, no easy days. I studied wherever I could. At the kitchen table while dinner cooked. On the couch while my son napped against my shoulder. Late at night, long after the house had gone quiet. Sometimes I didn't even realize how tired I was until I caught myself rereading the same sentence 5 times. Money was still a constant pressure. Tuition, books, gas, childcare, every expense felt like a risk. So I picked up extra work cleaning offices after hours. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet. And sometimes, that quiet felt like the only place I could think clearly. There were nights I carried my son with me, his small body resting against my chest while I vacuumed empty hallways and wiped down desks no one thought twice about. I'd pause sometimes just to look at him, to remind myself why I couldn't stop. "You're going to understand one day," I'd whisper to him. why I didn't give up. Time moved forward, slowly at first, then all at once. Before I knew it, he was starting school. Bringing home drawings, stick figures holding hands, houses with crooked roofs, bright suns in the corners. "Look, Mommy," he'd say proudly. "That's us." And every time my chest tightened. Because he didn't see struggle. He saw a home. That mattered more than anything. When I finally finished community college, I didn't celebrate. Not really. Because I knew I wasn't done, not even close. The next step was bigger, harder, scarier, a university. A real step toward something that once felt completely out of reach. When the acceptance letter arrived, I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My hands actually shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant. This wasn't survival anymore. This was change. Grandma held the letter like it was something sacred. "You're not just changing your life," she said softly. "You're changing his too." And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. I wasn't chasing a dream anymore. I was building a future, brick by brick, choice by choice, no matter how hard it got. But what I didn't know yet was just how much harder it was about to become. Because the next chapter wouldn't just test my determination. Getting into university felt like winning a battle. Staying there, that was the war. The pace was different. Faster, heavier, unforgiving. Professors didn't slow down. Assignments stacked up quickly. Expectations were higher and excuses didn't matter. Everyone around me seemed prepared, confident, like they belonged there. I didn't feel that way, not at first. I felt like I was constantly catching up, reading more, studying longer, pushing harder just to stay in the same place as everyone else. But quitting was never an option. It had never been. My days became even more intense. Classes, work, motherhood, it all blended together until I couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. There were nights I fell asleep with books still open. Mornings where I woke up already exhausted. Moments where doubt crept in quietly. Maybe this is too much. Maybe I aimed too high. But every time that voice showed up, I shut it down. Because I had come too far to turn back. Law school came next, and nothing could have prepared me for it. It wasn't just difficult. It was consuming. Case law, arguments, endless reading, pages and pages of material that demanded focus I didn't always have left to give. I carried flashcards everywhere, reviewed notes while waiting in line, listened to recorded lectures while driving, cooking, cleaning. Every spare second had a purpose. Other students complained about pressure, about stress, about how overwhelming it all was, and they weren't wrong. But for me, there was something different. I didn't have the option of slowing down. There was no backup plan, no safety net waiting if I failed. Just everything I had already built, and everything I could lose. Some nights, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, practicing arguments out loud. Not because I felt confident, but because I refused to walk into anything unprepared. "You can do this," I'd tell my reflection, even when I wasn't sure I believed it. Years passed like that. Hard, relentless, worth it. The day of the bar exam arrived quietly. No big moment, no dramatic buildup. Just a test that carried the weight of everything I had worked for. I sat there, staring at the paper in front of me, hands slightly unsteady. Not from fear of the questions, but from fear of what failure would mean. When it was over, I didn't feel relief, just emptiness, like I had nothing left to give. Waiting for the results was its own kind of torture. Days felt longer. Nights felt heavier. Every what-if played on repeat until the letter came. I opened it slowly, carefully, like rushing it might somehow change the outcome. And then I saw it, my name, on the list. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then everything hit at once. I sank to the floor, tears coming faster than I could stop them. Not quiet tears this time. Not hidden, raw, overwhelming, real. Grandma was there in seconds, wrapping her arms around me like she had done so many times before. "You did it," she whispered. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had made it. But life doesn't pause for victories. And just when everything finally felt stable, everything changed again. Because the moment I thought I had found solid ground, life pulled it out from under me. For the first time in years, life felt steady. Not perfect, not easy, but stable. I had a career, a real one. The kind I used to think only belonged to other people. I worked long hours, handled difficult cases, and carried responsibilities that once would have terrified me. But now I managed them, not flawlessly, but confidently. At home, things felt different too. Lighter, warmer, complete. My son was older now, growing into his own person with his own opinions, his own humor, his own way of seeing the world. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of the little boy he used to be, but most days I saw someone new, someone I was proud of. And Grandma, she was still the center of it all. She moved slower than before, took more breaks, rested more often, but her presence, just as strong as ever. She still sat on the porch in the evenings, still asked the same simple questions, still made everything feel grounded, no matter how chaotic life became. I think part of me believed she would always be there. Not forever, but long enough for me to be ready. I was wrong. It happened on a quiet afternoon. No warning, no build-up, just a moment that changed everything. My son found her in the garden, lying beside the rows of tomatoes she had spent years tending. Peaceful, still. At first, he thought she was resting, until she didn't move. The call came while I was at work. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember the traffic. I don't even remember breathing. I just remember the feeling, like something inside me had dropped and never came back up. At the hospital, everything felt unreal. Doctors spoke in calm, measured tones. Words like heart, age, natural. Words that were supposed to make it easier, but didn't. When I saw her, she looked the same, almost, just quieter. I sat beside her, holding her hand, trying to memorize everything, the warmth, the shape, the feeling of something that had always been there. "You gave me everything," I whispered. My voice didn't sound like mine. Her eyes opened slightly, just enough. "You gave me more," she said softly. Even then, even in that moment, she was thinking about me. I broke, completely. She passed 2 days later. Quietly, gently, the way she had lived. The house changed after that, not physically, but emotionally. It felt empty, like something essential had been removed. The kind of silence that doesn't just surround you, it settles inside you. My son tried to stay strong, but I saw it. The way he lingered near her room, the way he looked at her chair like he expected her to still be there. And I realized something I wasn't ready to face. She hadn't just been my support, she had been our foundation. And now she was gone. I thought the hardest part was losing her, saying goodbye, learning how to exist without her. But I was wrong. Because just as I was trying to process that loss, something else was already beginning. Something I never expected. Because grief wasn't the only thing waiting for me, my past was about to return, and this time it wasn't coming quietly. Grief has a way of slowing everything down. Days feel heavier. Silence feels louder. And even the smallest tasks take more energy than they should. After Grandma passed, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a memory. I moved through it carefully, like if I made too much noise, I might disturb something sacred. Her chair remained untouched. Her kitchen stayed exactly the way she left it. I wasn't ready to change anything. Not yet. The funeral was simple, just the way she would have wanted. People filled the small church, neighbors, friends, strangers whose lives she had quietly touched over the years. They told stories, stories I had never heard before. She helped us when we had nothing. She never asked for anything in return. She showed up when no one else did. Each story added something new to the woman I thought I already knew, and somehow made losing her even harder. A few days later, I was asked to meet with a local attorney to go over her final arrangements. I expected paperwork, formalities, nothing more. But the moment I sat down across from him, I sensed something different, something unexpected. "She planned everything very carefully," he said, adjusting his glasses. I nodded. "That sounds like her." He opened a folder and slid a set of documents toward me. "Your grandmother named you as her sole beneficiary." That didn't surprise me. She didn't have much. At least, that's what I believed. Then he continued. Several years ago, she sold a portion of her land. Quietly, she invested the money. Let it grow. I frowned slightly, trying to follow. How much are we talking about? He paused, just for a second, but it was enough. After everything is accounted for, it comes to approximately 1.6 million. The number didn't make sense. Not at first. It didn't fit into my understanding of reality. I'm sorry, what? He repeated it, calmly, clearly, and just like that, everything shifted. I sat there, staring at the papers, trying to process what I was seeing. All those years, the coupons, the sacrifices, the simple life she lived. She hadn't been struggling. She had been saving, for me. The realization hit harder than the number itself. This wasn't just money, it was intention. It was love stored over time. A future she had quietly built for me without ever saying a word. I should have felt relieved, grateful, maybe even excited. But instead, I cried. Because she never got to see what this would do for us. She never got to enjoy what she had created. She gave it all away, just like she always did. In the weeks that followed, I handled everything carefully. No rushing, no reckless decisions. I set aside savings, made plans, even created a small fund to help young mothers finish their education, something I knew she would have wanted. For a moment, it felt like something good had come from the loss. But life doesn't give you peace without testing it. It started with a phone call, a number I didn't recognize, a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years. "This is your father." I froze. Then came the second voice, colder, sharper. "We need to talk about the inheritance." No apology, no hesitation, no acknowledgement of the past, just a demand. And in that moment, I understood something very clearly. They hadn't come back for me. They came back for what I had. And what they did next would drag everything into a fight I never asked for. The first time I saw them again, I felt 16. Not the woman I had become, not the life I had built, just the girl they had thrown out without a second thought. They stood outside my house like they belonged there, like nothing had changed, like 20 years of silence meant nothing. "We need to talk," my father said, his tone flat, almost impatient. No apology, no hesitation. I didn't invite them inside. I didn't offer them anything. I simply said, "There's nothing to talk about." But they didn't leave. Of course they didn't. Within days, the letter arrived. Official. Cold, legal. A lawsuit. They were claiming the inheritance, every dollar of it. I sat at the kitchen table, her table, reading the words over and over again, trying to understand how people could be so disconnected from what was right. My son stood across from me, anger written all over his face. "They can't do this," he said. I looked at him, calm, steady. "They can try," I replied. And that's exactly what they did. The case moved quickly. Meetings, filings, endless discussions. I hired an attorney I trusted, someone sharp, precise, and unshakable. She reviewed everything and said the same thing I already knew. They don't have a case. But that didn't stop them. Because this was never just about the law, it was about control, pride, greed. The day of the hearing arrived quietly, but the courthouse didn't feel quiet. People had gathered. Word had spread. Stories always do. I walked up those steps in a navy suit, my posture straight, my mind clear. Not nervous, not afraid, just ready. Inside, the room buzzed with low conversation. Wooden benches creaked, papers shuffled. And then I saw them, my parents, standing beside their attorney, smiling. They thought this was already over, that they had won before it even began. What they didn't know was that this courtroom wasn't unfamiliar to me. It was mine. As proceedings began, I stepped forward, not to argue, not to defend, but to take my place. And then it happened. Their lawyer walked past them, confident, focused. Straight toward the front, he stopped, turned, and said the words that changed everything. "Good morning, Your Honor." The silence that followed was immediate, heavy, unavoidable. I watched the realization spread across their faces, slow at first, then all at once. Confusion, shock, disbelief. Because in that moment, they finally understood. I wasn't the girl they had abandoned. I wasn't the mistake they tried to erase. I was the woman who rebuilt everything they thought I had lost. And now, I was the one holding the power they once used against me. The case didn't last long. It didn't need to. The will was clear. The law was clear. The truth was undeniable. Their claim was dismissed, completely. They didn't say much on their way out. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. But this time, it didn't follow me, because I wasn't carrying it anymore. I walked out of that courtroom knowing something had finally closed. Not just the case, but the past. And as I stepped into the sunlight, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Not because I had won, but because I had become someone they could never control again. And that was the real victory.